In this video, I answer your questions in this hobby Q&A celebrating 13 years of Tabletop Minions. I started this channel in earnest in early March of 2013. I kind of missed the recent anniversary because of the production of our new game, the one that Vince and I are working on, Repent, Ye Foolish Gods, which is releasing in early June. And then, of course, there was also Adepticon, and there was stuff like that and everything. So it just sort of escaped me. And then just recently, I thought to myself, well, we could celebrate now, right? So I asked on the socials earlier this week for questions, from you for me, and I got a lot of them, like a lot. So I couldn't use all of them, obviously, because this would be an even longer video than I think it might go, but I'm going to answer a bunch of them here in this Q&A video. Like I said, it might go kind of a bit long. So, get comfy, get yourself something to drink, perhaps, do some hobby maybe, while I drop some answers. So the first one is technically two questions that are related, but they're from different people. What do you think has had the biggest impact on the hobby since you started the channel? And, other question, what is your favorite thing about the hobby that has changed or come out since you started? So they're basically kind of related. I would say the answer to that is 3D printing. 3D printing has really changed the way that the hobby is accessible to people. I love the fact that people can now make really weird stuff without having to think too much about whether it's something that can make them. Usually you want to make stuff so that you can make money, I suppose, but you can also just sculpt stuff and put it out there for free because you're not going to lose money particularly as much, right? Like if you were to say 10, 15 years ago, I'm going to make some cool models and give them away for free. Well, they're still going to have to get, poured or made in some fashion. They're going to have to get shipped around the world. And if you're just giving away models for free, that's very expensive. But nowadays, if you wanted to, you could do that with the STLs. But even if you don't want to do that, you still want to try to make some money. You don't have to think about, well, all right, I have to get molds made, whether they're, rubber molds for metal or for resin, or whether they're metal molds for, plastic. That's a huge expense. Am I going to sell enough? I have to ship them all over the place. I have to store them, warehousing, fulfillment, all that. Am I going to make enough money? Now you can just be like, I'm going to make this cool thing, put it out there, and it might be weird, and there might only be, 200 people on the whole planet that think that this is cool, but those people might also buy it too, and then there you go. And I'm not, particularly out a ton of money, out some time, being creative or whatever. So because of that, we see amazingly weird and crazy things out there for people who are into STL culture, I guess, to be able to get for their tabletop wargaming. And I think that that's the most kind of awesome thing that has happened in wargaming in quite some time. What's been the most challenging miniature that you had to paint? By the way, love your channel. Well, thank you. That's very nice of you to say. Easily the most challenging one was the one time that I basically made a miniature for a painting competition. I entered the Capital Palette at Nova Open back in 2023, and I painted I think a Death Shroud Bodyguard is what it's called. It's like a Nurgle Chaos Space Marine Terminator looking guy. And it was really the first display piece I'd ever really painted. And I spent about a month on it. And I entered it in the Apprentice division, because they have 3 divisions at that competition, Apprentice, Journeyman, and Master. So being my first ever display piece, even though I've been painting for 20 years, just not to that level, I entered it and I won a gold. I made a whole video about the whole thing if you're interested, ciao. It took a month, and like I said, the entire time I was just like, I could be doing so many other models for the tabletop right now. I had to constantly not try to do the sort of speed painting type of things that I do on most every other model, and go, no, I should really put on the 15th layer of glaze on his kneecap or whatever. And so that was probably the most challenging, and the display painting bug did not bite me, or if it did, I was, naturally immune, and I haven't really done any more stuff like that particularly since. This sounds morbid. Oh, good. But it's genuine. What is your succession plan for all of the hobby items acquired through your life? It may be a lot. You're not wrong. It is a lot. I'm getting older. I don't want to burden my loved ones, and I'm considering a line item in my will is the question. So for me, honestly, I've been thinking about it a bit lately. And while I was at Adepticon, there was a booth there for a company called Noble Knight Games, hashtag not sponsored. But Vince and I were walking around and we started talking to the folks there. And if you've ever heard of Noble Knight, they're based out of Wisconsin and they sell a lot of used stuff. So my plan is after I launch the game, me and Vince launched the game on the 5th of June. And then the week after that is TMX, Tabletop Minions Expo. Check out, the link in the description and all that kind of stuff for that. Right after that, my plan is to start going through and finding things in my collection that need to go. You know what I mean? I think it's going to be a lot of Star Wars Legion, unfortunately, because I bought pretty heavily into that game, and then they changed the rules, and then. So I still have my Galactic Empire army, which is painted, but it needs to have more stuff because they raised the number of points and blah, blah, blah. But I also bought a bunch of Rebel stuff, which I'm not going to end up using now. So a lot of that stuff's going to go. I've just got a lot of things that are going to go. And the benefit is that you basically come up with this big list and then you send it to them and then they come back and they tell you how much they'll give you for it. And then you decide back and forth. And then you can either ship it to them and they'll pay the shipping, I guess is what I was told. Or if you live about 2 hours or less away from the place like I do, you just might drive there. It's outside of Madison, Wisconsin, and Madison's a really pretty cool city. So I could see my wife and I going down on a Saturday, dropping that stuff off, and then spending the day down in Madison. So that's my next plan. But yeah, I don't know. At some point, I think that some of that stuff's going to end up having to get, like, after I pass, let's say, hopefully eBay so other people can enjoy it, but I am less and less interested in gaming books versus gaming PDFs because I know at some point in the future, not necessarily my lifetime, maybe not the next generation's lifetime, but at some point those books are going to end up in the landfill, no matter how beloved they are, no matter how much cool UV aqueous coating is on and the gold foil on the side and all the super fancy stuff that made that book so cool, it's going to end up in dirt at some point. And so that's why I'm kind of a little bit more interested in, frankly, in electronic stuff, like that. How do you take inspiration from the top quality painters that rank amongst your hobby friends? And they do. And how do you avoid the negative comparisons to your own work? So I've got some friends who are very, 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 very good painters, and a lot of them have a lot of awards, and they do great. And they're people that I sometimes ask questions from and I get like advice from to some degree, especially when I was working on that display piece. But for my tabletop stuff, I don't look at the things that they generally do and then try to emulate that for things that I'm going to be using for gaming. It just doesn't. It's setting yourself up for failure to take a look at the super fancy stuff that you see, from Golden Demon winners on, Instagram or whatever, and go, that's what I want my first group of Space Marines to look like. It's not reasonable. So the trick is just for me to train myself that when I see stuff from Vince and from Sam and from, John and from Ben, like when we're sitting around at VinciCon and things like that, not to compare the stuff that I like to paint, my weird little guys for war bands in, weird little skirmish games, not to compare those guys to stuff that they're working on for like a Golden Demon. It's just that way leads madness. So you just can't. You just have to understand that the things that you want to do to get things on the tabletop are a completely different process in many situations even than the stuff that those folks do to get things into the winner's circle. Do they do a winner's circle at these? I don't think they do. What are the chances of seeing a playthrough or bat rep for one of your games that you and Mr. Vince created? Actually, it's really high because we have a battle report for every one of the games that we've produced, I'm pretty sure. If you just go to the Snarling Badger website, snarlingbadger.com, and then you pick one of the games you're interested in, Space Station Zero, Reign in Hell, Majestic 13, etc., you go to that page on the website, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and there'll be a bunch of videos down there. And one is explaining like, hey, well, what's this game about? And like another one is like, hey, how does a turn work for this game and stuff like that. And then there's generally always a battle report that is actually made by Vince, kind of going through not necessarily the whole game. Sometimes it's the whole game, but sometimes it's just a turn of the game, like a long kind of thing. But he plays it all out. So you can watch those if you've got any questions or are interested in trying to figure out sort of how some of this stuff works a little bit better. Battle reports with me and Vince together. I mean, we live like 9 hours apart. So it's less likely. And also, I'm bad at making battle reports. If you've been watching the channel, you've seen maybe a few that, but yeah, so that kind of thing with me and him playing, maybe. Well, I don't know. But definitely if you're just looking to like learn more about our games, you just go to the website, find the game you're looking for, and scroll down to the bottom. What has been one of, if not the most surprising thing to happen to you since kicking off the channel? Back when I was in college in the early 90s, we would play Car Wars by Steve Jackson Games on Friday nights, me and my group of gaming friends and stuff like that. We weren't going out to bars talking to girls. That was weird, or whatever. I don't know. We would just sit and play Car Wars by Steve Jackson Games, and it was a great thing. And we also loved Ogre by Steve Jackson Games, which was even an older game. And we would play Illuminati by Steve Jackson Games and everything like that. And so fast forward to, I don't know, the 2010s, I think, they did a new version of Car Wars, and they did a Kickstarter and all that kind of stuff, and I backed the Kickstarter, and I got a bunch of the cool new plastic cars. The original Car Wars was like little cardboard chips you played on a mat, and now they've got plastic cars and all that kind of stuff and everything. And anyway, I talked about the game. I went down actually to their convention in Austin back in 2019 and got to demo it before it came out and all kinds of stuff like that. And I thought it was really kind of cool and stuff like that. And at one point I got an email just one night, sort of randomly, from Steve Jackson saying, hey, thanks for talking about the game. I really appreciate it. It was nice to see you talking about it in this video and that kind of thing. And the idea that at some point in my life that Steve Jackson from Steve Jackson Games, who made all the games that I played in college, would email me and say, hey, thanks for talking about our game on your YouTube channel. Like, that was pretty crazy. I thought that was, I very much appreciated, obviously, but it was just also not something that I expected. And then I even got to have a conversation with him at a convention, a trade show, technically, the Game Manufacturers Association trade show. I think it was in 2024 in Louisville. And anyway, it was really great to chat with him and talk about things and stuff like that. So that's one of those things that I did not expect kind of going into this whole lifestyle. What's the least expected challenge to running a YouTube channel? It shouldn't have been, but it was time management. That shouldn't have surprised me, honestly, that time management is probably the most important thing. Time management is a hugely important thing, especially when you decide, hey, I think I'm going to make a video every single week. The early days, I didn't make videos every week. The first about 2.5 years, I was just random. And then that was obviously like, bad time management coming home to roost. And then when it's time, hey, we're going to start doing this on the weekly, it becomes a situation where you really have to get good about managing your time. And if you don't, then you don't hit schedules. What are your thoughts on the new kill team allowing for large monsters or vehicles as a single adversary? It's interesting. I've heard of that thing before somewhere. I think it was a cool game made by some very handsome fellows, and the game was called Majestic 13, where you had a team of 5 operatives who would pretty much in every scenario fight against one big alien. It's so strange that's the same type of thing. It's very weird. Strange. Do you think the hobby is leaning too far into the competitive scene, and is it spoiling it? No. I think the Games Workshop is leaning too far into the competitive scene, and it is kind of spoiling Games Workshop. We always have to remember that Games Workshop is not the hobby. Games Workshop is a part of the hobby. And the rest of the hobby is not leaning nearly as much into competitive play as GW is. And so, yeah, the rest of the hobby is doing great, I think, in that regards. But Games Workshop is leaning too far into competitive, in my opinion. And while it's making bigger and bigger tournaments and more people showing up at these tournaments, and that's very cool, it has a lot of other knock-on effects, which I think are negative overall. So, yeah. What has been your favorite game over the years? What is your favorite current game? So, honestly, Kill Team 2018 was probably back in the day, probably my favorite game up until that point. The standalone version of Kill Team that came out in 2018, I was all about that. Like the few battle reports that I've done here on the channel were the old Kill Team. I loved making all kinds of different teams for it and coming up with different things and like different models and all kinds of stuff. I had 6 or 8 completely painted teams, I think, when they switched to the 2021 version, which completely killed the game, in my opinion, personally, But yeah, that was my favorite game. It was a game I played all the time and I thought about all the time. And they came out with all the cool expansions like elites and all kinds of stuff like that. And it just kept expanding and doing really cool things. And I really enjoyed it. And that's what I put the majority of my hobby into. But not so much anymore. Nowadays, let me see here. What was the question again? What is your favorite current game? It's going to be probably, I don't know if it's a tie, but I'm going to say Space Weirdos is one of my favorites. One-page rules, specifically one-page rules, Grimdark Future Firefight, which is the skirmish sci-fi game. And then, of course, Trench Crusade is also a thing I've been playing a ton of lately and painting. I've painted 2 separate war bands, and I'm working on a third, probably starting this weekend. So, yeah, I would say definitely those 3 are my current favorites. What is the earliest model paint job that you still have, and do you ever look at it for inspiration to see how much you have improved? Yeah, actually. Hang on. I don't normally keep it in my pocket, but I remembered to bring it because of this. It's this guy. Over here. Better? Anyway, it's an atlas from BattleTech that I painted with enamels, which is why I'm not super careful about keeping it in my pocket. It's pretty tough. But I painted it with enamels sometime in the 90s, and I keep it on my desk usually so that I can compare stuff that I'm painting to now to stuff that I painted quite some time ago. I think it's always a very good idea to keep old models around if you can. If you can find the oldest model you think you've ever painted, keep it somewhere near your hobby desk so that you can be like, if you're like, God, I just don't think I'm doing very well, you can always compare it to this and be like, oh, well, I mean, you should only ever compare yourself to yourself in the past. You shouldn't compare yourself to stuff you see online or friends or anything like that. Compare yourself to yourself. If you could wave a magic wand and manifest a specific intellectual property-themed tabletop minigame, then what would it be and how would it play? I'm honestly not into licensed games that much. I played the heck out of Star Wars X-Wing. I mean, that was a licensed game, obviously, and I mentioned Star Wars Legion before. But for the most part, I really, Star Wars X-Wing's not around anymore, and partially it's because of the license. Licensing IPs to use in games can very frequently end in problems because every time you sell a model, you got to pay the licensor. You're the licensee. You have to pay the licensor. Vince and I did a podcast about this recently on an episode of our podcast on our Snarlcast podcast, which you can find online. Yeah, I'm not personally a big fan of licensing. There were actually several questions about licensing in the questions that I got, and people asking about, what IP, what book, what movie. And I honestly just want people to make new stuff, you know what I mean? Because when you decide, I'm going to make a game based off of this movie or this series of movies, you will get to a point where you run out of stuff to talk about. Because if it was a single movie, you're done. Like you've made models of all the spaceships, or you've made models of all the people, and there were no more people. And you usually can't add stuff because then the people who own the movie are like, well, we didn't make that guy. You can't, and stuff like that. So I don't know. I'm not super into licensed stuff. I know a lot of companies are, but I'm not really into it. When you look into the future, maybe the next 13 years, what is your biggest hope for the wargaming hobby, and what is your biggest fear? My biggest hope is definitely easier and safer 3D printing. Like filament printing is pretty easy and pretty safe. It's not 100% safe, not 100% easy, but it's pretty good. I use a Bamboo Lab A1, love it. It is about as plug and play as possible. I trust it more than I trust my HP printer upstairs when I tell it to print. Now, obviously, the HP printer is not going to print anything out that's particularly three-dimensional. If it works, it will print out a page, hopefully, but not always. But that Bamboo Lab, man, that's a workhorse, and it's awesome. Resin printing is still a little spooky to me, but the detail and the quality are so good. I am looking for something that is less dangerous chemicals, in that situation and easier to do. So I feel like we're going to keep moving in that direction, and that's the hope. As far as fears for the future of wargaming, it's probably AI. I'm very anti-AI, and I don't want that stuff kind of getting into our wargaming. I'm very appreciative of Games Workshop coming out like a couple months back and being like, we're not using generative AI in any of our stuff. We're just not gonna. This is like our declaration and stuff. And so props to them for that. I'd like to see that come out of more companies. Vince and I are the same. So, just there's us and then there's Games Workshop, well, the other way around probably actually. Whatever happened to the original group of minions? If you go to the Tabletop Minions website, tabletopminions.org, there's an about page, I think is what it's called, and it kind of talks about how I started Tabletop Minions. Not so much the channel, but like the name. Tabletop Minions originally started in 2009, and it was going to be a wargaming club here in town. I was trying to make a wargaming club, so I came up with the name, registered the domain, even designed the logo, started like a forum because there were no Discords back then, started a forum and tried to get people into the club, and it just didn't particularly work. But on the website, there is a picture of the people who made it to the first ever meeting of the Tabletop Minions Wargaming Club. And I still kind of keep in touch with pretty much everybody in that group, but there's one guy whose name is Jake that I haven't heard from or seen or anything like that in years. But the rest of the guys in that picture are people that I all still, keep in touch with, at least to some degree. Would you do model comparison videos? For example, Space Orcs. So my assumption by this question is, would I compare, say, one manufacturer's Space Orcs, Games Workshop, to Mantic Space Orcs, to somebody else's Space Orcs, to somebody else's Space Orcs? I don't know if that's a thing that people necessarily want. It might be. I don't know. It would be mostly opinion. It would mostly be me saying, well, I think that these are better than those or whatever, and that kind of stuff. So I don't know. That's a good question. Let me know in the comments below if that's the type of thing that you're interested in. I don't know what kind of overall output of what's that going to teach you? I don't know that, but if there's reasons for it, I'd take a look at it. Sure, why not? Do you expect to continue the channel for another 13 years? I hope so, they said. That's what they said. I kind of hope so too. I don't know. In 13 years, I will be creeping up on 68 years old. So I don't know. That's a good question. I'm self-employed at this point. This is my day job, one of several. I have technically 3 day jobs. I have, the YouTube channel, I have the game company with me and Vince, and then I have my work with the folks at Army Painter. And so those are the 3 pillars of what keeps me in food and clothing, and cats. But yeah, I do kind of hope so to some degree, but we'll see how it goes. Maybe I'll pivot, maybe, who knows? Who knows? But I don't have any plans to stop anytime soon. I don't see myself as ever particularly retiring. I'm just not that type. And also, I live in America, so it's pretty difficult. Do you have any advice for someone that's thinking of making their own wargaming/hobby content? Yeah, I would say that you should just start. Just sit down and start doing it. Don't plan a ton. Don't go out and buy a bunch of equipment and lights and this and that and all that kind of stuff. You can use your phone. If you really want to buy something, I would tell you, and I always tell people this when they ask, the best thing to buy is a microphone. Nowadays, you can get these really inexpensive wireless mics that you plug the thing into your phone, and then you have a little thing that just sits on your, whatever, and then that makes better audio. People will forgive bad video, but they won't forgive bad audio, especially in the hobby space, because so many people are just listening to your video while they're sitting there and they're painting. And if the audio sucks, they're going to stop. But if the video is like, that doesn't bother them as much, at least initially, it's more authentic. Authenticity is a big deal. So yeah, I would tell you to just start doing it. And the reason I'd tell you to do that is because you will find out very quickly whether you like it or not. If you don't like it, don't continue to do it. This is not like, there are a lot of jobs that are out there in the world that you do because you want to eat, but you don't necessarily like the job. Most people work a job they don't particularly like, but they got to eat, right? They got to keep the lights on. And so in that situation, that's just what you do. But when this is like kind of a creative thing, you can't think about it as a job. You got to think about it as a passion. And if you're like, God, I hate this process. I don't like talking to the camera. I don't like, like whatever. Well, then maybe think about blogs. Blogs are coming back. Maybe you are better at writing than you are talking to a camera and that kind of stuff. Maybe it's a podcast. You're fine talking. You just don't want to be on camera. There's all kinds of different options you can do. But I would tell you, if you're interested, give it a try. It, like I said, doesn't cost anything really. Give it a try and start, see where you go. Because if it turns out you'll like it, then you want to keep going with it. But if it turns out, oh, this is not for me, you want to know that before you, commit too much. I get people asking all the time, well, what camera should I buy? I'm like, you got a phone, use that. Maybe get a mic, get a cheap one, start there, see if you like it first. That's the most important thing. What's your biggest hobby dream that you have yet to achieve? I want to learn sculpting. Not necessarily miniatures, maybe someday. That's like sculpting actual 28 millimeter scale miniatures, like not with my hands. I mean, I'd be using my hands, but like with a computer, not with like, putty or whatever. That type of sculpting, that's like way off in the distance. That is definitely a dream. But learning to make terrain, and things like that, 3D sculpt terrain for people to print. I've already started doing some of that on my Patreon. You can either join the Patreon at the $4 a month level and get access to, there's only one piece right now, but a second piece is very closely coming. Or you can just buy the piece currently for like $3 or whatever. But I am starting to put STLs up for terrain that I've built so that I want to kind of keep going in that direction. That's the thing that I've been really interested in, is trying to learn that type of sculpting. I'm also thinking about trying to learn how to not necessarily sculpt entire models, but just heads. So that like you could, buy the STLs and print out a bunch of heads and then use them for kit bashing and, replacing heads on the models that you have or whatever, like different looking heads on your, I don't know, Space Marines, Space Elves, Necromunda guys, stuff from, Wargames, Atlantic, whatever, just different weird heads and things like that. So I'm trying to learn that a little bit as well. Another Kill Team question here. Do you think Kill Team should add list building back into the game and risk driving away people who like a one-box team game? Or do you think that they should leave it as a one-box team game as it lowers the barrier of entry to potential new players? I don't know, honestly. Like I've stopped thinking about Kill Team for the most part. Like I'll buy some models from them once in a while. They come out with something cool, like those Sanctifiers are real cool. Felgor Ravagers are neat. I use those for other games. But yeah, I don't know. I would be very surprised if they went back to the old way. I'd be very surprised. I doubt they will. I think that they like the idea of you buying a box, finding out, well, this box is actually not enough. I need 2 boxes. And then in 18 months going, oh, that box isn't legal anymore. And that's the churn that they seem to be looking for. And so I don't think they're going to flip it back. So I'm not going to really think about it too much. There's too many other games to play. You got me through a hard time. Well, I'm sorry to hear that you had a hard time, but I hope I was able to help. Thank you for that. Will Snarling Badger Studio be releasing an army for OPR's collaboration project? I just did a video a couple weeks ago about this new stuff that One Page Rules is doing, where they're working with different sculptors and things like that to make these, like you got these different companies that make models, and now your War Machine models could end up being in One Page Rules. So, that kind of stuff. It was a cool video, I think. But ciao. We don't have any plans, me and Vince, for Snarling Badger Studios to work with OPR in that way. But number one, we don't really sculpt stuff or anything like that yet, so we don't really do that. Now, that being said, Tabletop Minions might be working with the folks over at OPR. I've got some ideas I've chatted with them with a little bit. Again, not necessarily sculpting stuff, but something kind of related to those cool little army books and all that kind of stuff. There'll be more information eventually. Do you get to play war games as much as you'd hoped, or does the channel tend to steal more time from you than you hoped? Well, the channel does take up a lot of time. It always has. It takes up, well, it still takes up about roughly the same amount now. It's just that I have 2 other jobs that are related to the channel that's what takes up all of my time. So I don't get to play as much as I would like. And the beginning part of the year is always a big, very, very busy time because we're getting ready to launch the new game, and then there's Adepticon, that kind of stuff, and all that, and then Tabletop Minions Expo, and then middle of June, I can kind of coast a little bit for a while. So my hope is to be able to play a lot more games, basically once TMX is done. How in the world have you managed to consistently produce a video a week for 686 weeks in a row? Okay, well, so full disclosure, it's actually only, I wrote myself a note here, it's actually only 550 weeks in a row, 551 if you count this video. So when I started the channel in 2013, like I kind of said earlier, I wasn't putting out a video every week. It was kind of like, oh, every 3 weeks, and then it was like 2 weeks in between, and then it was a month, and then it was just all over the board because I was kind of getting my sea legs, I guess, for content creation. It was autumn of 2015 when I was all of a sudden suddenly between jobs, between my previous job I'd worked at for 8 years, and now I was looking for another job, when I thought to myself, well, I got a bunch of free time. Why don't I start making a video every single Friday? I should just start doing this consistently, because consistency is key. So October 30th, 2015, I put up a video, and then I put up one next Friday after that, and next Friday after that, and next Friday after that, and next Friday after that, for, at this point now, 551 videos. A little over 10 years, about 10 and a half years. So how do you do it? I've said this before, I feel like it is what people who are physically fit refer to as building a habit. Right? If you're physically fit, the reason you're physically fit probably is because you've made it such a habit that you are going to go and work out and do whatever exercise thing. And if you don't do it, you just can't let yourself not do it. Like you just get it to be such a habit ingrained in your brain that you can't, For me, if it's Tuesday and I don't have an idea yet for my video, it starts to just bug me, and it just starts to, here's the deal. Also, and this is really stupid, I do the video the day before it comes out, for the most part. Like a good portion of the video gets done on the day before. Now, if I'm doing some tutorial stuff, sometimes that takes several days before, where I'm working on things and painting things. But like today is Thursday, the 14th. Yes, today's 14th of May. I am recording this. It's 1:15 p.m. and this video will go live in just a little over 12 hours. So I do my videos and then they go up. Whereas I've got friends, my good friend Vince, he is 8 to 10 videos ahead, and his weekly videos that he's been doing for a zillion years. I can't do that. I don't know why. So not only do I do a video every single week and I've never missed one, I also really ride that knife edge of and sometimes you get sick or whatever, but you still put up a video, even if it's a video saying, oh, I'm sick. I had to do one once when my mom was in the emergency room. I had to make a video from the parking lot of the emergency room in October of 22. So yeah, you just kind of make it happen. How did you discover Space Weirdos, and what about it inspired you to try it? I think it popped up in the new releases feed on the Wargame Vault website. Like the Wargame Vault website, the top part, there's these are best sellers, but then down below there's hey, here's the new stuff that's just come out, and it's just a constant scroll of new stuff that's come out. And I saw that cover, which is an astounding cover, and I was like, covers are super important these days, especially when you're looking at it on the web. It's basically like your thumbnail for your video. The cover really does a lot of heavy lifting. So I clicked on it. I'm like, that looks super cool. Plus the name, Space Weirdos. It's a great name. And I saw it was $5, and I saw it was 16 pages, and it was I'm like, yeah, I want to definitely check that out. And it just worked out really well, and it's a great game. If you don't know, there's a second edition that's going to be coming of Space Weirdos. He's going to be working with Osprey Games. So there's going to be a fancy schmancy printed version of it coming out sometime, I think, this year. I'm not exactly sure when, but I just found out about that sort of recently. So if you're interested, yeah. If Snarling Badger could play in any IP sandbox for a new game, what IP would it be in terms of what like to build and could be fun? No other limitations. Again, licensing, I'm not a big fan, so I don't see us ever doing that. We've made the joke many times that we would make we would like, if we were going to license something, we would license the 1988 movie with Roddy Piper called Hell Comes to Frogtown and turn that into a miniatures game. But one of my viewers, like on Twitch, one day I was talking about that. I stream on Twitch twice a week. And one of my viewers like did a bunch of research and was like, probably the company that made that film and produced it got bought by this company that then got bought by this company that then got bought by Disney. So probably Disney owns it now, which means that Roddy Piper is officially a Disney princess, which I think is canon, and that's cool. But I don't know. I don't see us actually really ever getting the license from Disney so that we can make a game. It just doesn't seem like it's in our wheelhouse. You've mentioned Blackout a couple of times in different videos and have basically cemented the idea of getting into the game in my head. Have you tried it out? If no, why not? And if so, what was your impression of it? Oh yeah, I've played it. It's a cool game. I've got 4 different forces painted for it. I like how quick it is. I like how deadly it is. Like basically if you get shot, 99 times out of 100, you're dead. Well, that's not true. It's probably lower than that. There are some models in the game that have the ability to take more than one wound. Most everything in the game dies in 1 wound. So it's you have to be very careful. You have to be in cover. You don't stand outside of cover because you will just get, gone. It's a neat system. So yeah, I like the models. I like that it's sci-fi, like on a different planet, stuff, but it's not too far, like, 40,000 years in the future or whatever. It's like 150 to 200 years. And it's a pretty cool game. Again, we have 2 related questions. How have you effectively managed your commitments to the channel with your professional life over these last 13 years? And how many hours per week do you have time for the hobby besides filming? And do you still have a normal day job or are you retired already? Well, I'm self-employed, so I don't call myself retired. I worked a day job during the entirety of the YouTube channel until 2024. Technically, in 2022, I went to freelance. So I was still working for the company I've been working for, doing web design, UX, UI, that kind of stuff. And then I just switched to working for them, like I said, like a freelance situation. But it was because the gaming company was starting to take up more of my time. And then it got to a point in 2024 where I'm like, my concern is I'm going to have to get the game layout done. And then some company's going to come along and say, we need all this stuff done. And then I was going to be in a situation where I couldn't do both at the same time. So in 2024, I stopped working even as a freelancer for the company of folks who I love those folks. They're great, but I just didn't have the time anymore. So, but from 2013 all the way up until, like I said, 2022, 2024, I was working a regular day job too. It's just kind of a difficult thing. You just have to make the time. And if you're interested in doing it, again, you get back into time management, which we talked about before, all that kind of stuff. It's a lot. It really is. Does your wife ever tell you to grow up and stop playing toy soldiers? No, because she's cool. Yeah, that's pretty much the straight answer there. You were one of the first channels I listened to when I got into the hobby. How did you get started making YouTube videos? I wanted to learn video production, honestly. And so I thought I should talk about stuff that I like and everything. Oh, my blue light, it went out. Yeah, and so I started making videos. I had worked for the folks at Beasts of War. I was like a U.S. correspondent going to Adepticon and Gen Con. And so I would make these videos. I would produce a bunch of video and then send it to them, and they would make videos and stuff during the shows. But then I started making my own stuff because, again, I wanted to learn video production, so I started doing it that way. How do you store and transport your minis? Ever thought about a video about magnets or on minis or bases? Mostly I do foam, but I have gotten into magnets a little bit lately. So maybe that's a good idea to make a video about it. But I learned what I learned about magnets from Miniatures Rundown channel here on YouTube. They've got a video about how to put magnets on the bottom, and that's the way I do it. Do you ever use the same models for different games, or do you build new models for all the different miniature agnostic games? Does this interfere with the miniature agnostic nature of said games or not? No, I use models interchangeably amongst games all the time. That is the point, honestly, of miniature agnostic stuff. I can take these models and build a list for them to work in Space Weirdos and then throw them into Grimdark Future Firefight. And then if I want to, grab those same models and drop them into Space Station Zero, a game that we make. And yeah, that's the whole idea. So I do that all the time. When making your games, Reign in Hell, Space Station Zero, etc., do you come up with a theme first and build a game around that? Or do you think of the game engine first and then stretch a cool skin over that? It's always come up with the idea for the theme, the story, all that stuff. Sometimes it's literally just the title I come up with sometimes. That was the case with Majestic 13. I came up with a title. I was thinking about other things and I came up with a title and we went from there. If miniatures wargaming did not exist, what hobby do you think you would be doing? I'm also a photographer. I love photography, so probably I'd be doing more of that. But also maybe like, I like drones. I think drones are neat. I've never really gotten super deep into drone stuff, like drone photography and things like that, because I've got enough other hobbies, thank you, but I could see going down that road maybe. You travel a lot and you talk about hobbying on the go while at cons, but most tools, to my understanding, won't pass through TSA. Do you just buy new tools and then trash them, or do you mail them home, or are there clippers and stuff that are allowed on flights? I don't travel with tools too much. The only time I really ever do is when I go to VinciCon at Vince's place in Ohio. When I go to VinciCon, I have a checked bag. So, like when you fly, you can have like a backpack or something, and you can have a bag that's a carry-on that you put in the overhead thing. And then anything else, they put on that conveyor belt and then they stick it underneath the plane, and then you get it at the luggage check-in or whatever when you get to your location. I rarely ever fly with a checked bag, except when I'm going to VinciCon, because then I can throw in hobby knives, clippers, nail files, all kinds of that stuff that normally they won't let you put in your carry-on. So I'll put it into there, and I'll also put all my clothes in there, and then I will also put in a whole bunch of sprues, because I mostly do kit bashing when I'm at VinciCon. I don't usually paint too much. So I bring all that stuff in that extra bag, and then there's no hassle, because it's not in the cabin where you can get at it and try to take over the plane with a god hand clippers or something like that. I don't exactly know how that would work, but that's what they're concerned about. What led you to team up with Vince and start making games for Snarling Badger? So Snarling Badger Studios basically kind of started, I had this idea for Reign in Hell. Again, it was a name, it was a theme, it was some vague ideas of some slight mechanics. Like I came up with the idea for the title system that's in the game, and I had that idea. But I'm not particularly a game designer per se, like the mathematics and all that kind of stuff and the mechanics. But I knew that Vince was, and Vince and I were friends. So sometime around 2019, he was visiting. He was at Sam's place, and we were hanging out talking. And I asked him what he thought about the idea and if he'd be interested. And he's like, "Yeah, that might be kind of cool." And then the pandemic happened, and then we were bored because we weren't going to conventions and stuff like that. So sometime in 2020, we started working on Reign in Hell. And then probably about 6 months into that project, I was like, "Do you want to keep doing this?" And he's like, "What do you mean? Like finish the game? Like you don't want to finish it?" I'm like, "No." I'm like, "Do you want to keep making games after we get done with this one?" And that's how Snarling Badger Studios was born. What's the toughest skill that separates the tabletop painter from the artist painter? I would say probably blending, especially wet blending and glazing, stuff like that. You really, from what I can tell from the very little bit of display painting I've done, it was more about like layer after layer after layer to kind of build up these very, very soft kind of like, transitions and things like that. Whereas with tabletop stuff, if I'm doing any like soft transitions, I'm doing it with the airbrush initially when I do the zenithal, and then everything else after that is maybe some transitions with dry brushing, but otherwise it's mostly not. So yeah, that's kind of the big difference. Congrats on 13 years. Thank you. How do you resist going down the negative/drama route when it would be easy and likely garner more views and maintain focus on a positive and thoughtful outlook? There's no end to drama, as you know. Is it ever a fight to not be drawn into controversy? A little bit, but for the most part, I'm generally kind of a positive person. So yeah, I generally am more interested in doing the positive stuff. I want to kind of keep things. I want the hobby to be inclusive and interesting and accessible to more people. And a lot of drama, I don't think, is going to necessarily help me do that. What's your sweet spot for the number of minis you like to control in a game and how much time spent playing in a game in one evening? Sweet spot is usually under 10 miniatures. And, you know, less than 2 hours is usually like, that's probably the prime. I don't know. Longer than that, depends on the lighting. Sometimes I can get a bit of a headache. You know, it kind of depends. I'm running out of space on this card. This battery died over here. This is a very long video. I apologize, but lightning round. We're going to go through some things very quickly. How is your back doing? My back is doing much better. Thank you for asking. Are skirmish games the future of wargaming? Yes, I believe they are. I made a video about it just a couple weeks ago. Pachow. Do you varnish or otherwise finish your minis when they are all painted? Matte varnish, all the things. I'm a big fan of matte varnish. I always do that. When will we see the Wreck Age Part 2 video? Oh, gosh. Yeah, I don't think I have that footage anymore. Do you like any mass combat type games like DBA with multiple minis on a base? No, not really. I don't generally like the multiple minis on a single base kind of, it's just not for me. What was the first hobby war game you played? And even if you don't play it anymore, do you check to see if it's still around and how it's doing, you know, if it is? It was Battletech, and yeah, they seem to be doing just fine, so yeah. Boxers or briefs? Boxer briefs, actually, strangely. If you could talk to 20-year-old Adam, what would you say to him? I would say, don't take up smoking. I smoked from the age of 20 to the age of 30. I quit on my 30th birthday. I would tell 20-year-old Adam to save that money and put it into, I don't know, Apple stock or something like that. What is your most used piece of terrain for fantasy, and what is your most used piece of terrain for sci-fi? Actually, it's generally ruins for both. They kind of work both ways. Like, obviously, if the ruin is like of an office building, then it looks weird to have it in a fantasy game, but sometimes ruins are ruins, you know? Have you ever built / painted / played models representing your real-world self? Also, same question for wife, cats, friends. No, not really. Now that you mention it. I was going to get my head scanned one time, and it was like at a convention, and my head didn't break the scanner. Thank you very much. No, but the guy's laptop wouldn't boot. Like it was like he was offering it where he would sell you the STLs or something like that, and then he he couldn't get that thing to boot anymore. It was a Windows problem. Is it bad that I've probably watched more of your episodes than I've painted miniatures? It's not bad for me, so thank you. In honor of bringing Flarg into the wargaming lexicon, are there other fantasy and sci-fi expletives that you enjoy? I love frack from like Battlestar Galactica. There's frack this and fracking that. Yeah, that's kind of where that came from, really. When do you think you'll stop playing war games? Hopefully never. I mean, I can't think of a great reason why I'd want to stop. It's like my favorite hobby, and I really enjoy it. And you know, and the building and painting and all the stuff that's attached to it. So, yeah, I don't think so. I don't think I plan on doing that at all. In a word, sum up how you feel about 13 years of running this channel. One word. Content. So there's a bunch of cues that I have now aid in this Q&A video. This was fun, you know, and maybe I won't wait another 13 years to do it again, hopefully. I want to thank everyone for all the support over the last 13 years, and I hope I've been able to help you folks to get into the hobby or to, you know, enjoy your hobby more if you are already in it. You know, like that's always been the goal. So if you like this video, some anniversary-style depressmentation of the like button and or the hype button if you're on mobile. It always helps the channel out. And if you want to see more videos like this every single Friday, which will be fresh, just made the day before, you can hit subscribe as well down there. It's free. Thanks for watching.